start with a story that we heard from Muktananda many years ago. And it's a story about a young man who went to a famous guru, and he said to him, "Please tell me, what is the essence? What is the core? What is the heart of your teaching?" And the guru said, "I am that. You are that. Everything is that." The young man was really knocked out by this insight, and he left the ashram repeating it to himself. And as he headed home towards his village, he kept on saying to himself, "I am that. You are that. Everything is that." As he got closer to the village, he could see there was some disturbance going on. As he saw the movement and the disturbance, he looked at it and said, "I'm that. You are that. Everything is that." Soon, villagers started running towards him, yelling and screaming. And as he got closer, he could hear them saying, "Get out of the way, there's a wild elephant. Get out of the way." "I'm that, you are that, everything is that." He entered into the village and he saw the elephant. As it came towards him, he said, "I am that, you are that." And with that, the elephant picked him up and threw him up into a tree. Several days later, recovering in hospital with a broken leg and 2 broken arms, the guru came to visit him. And he said, "Well, why did you tell me that? I'm that, everyone is that. Look what happened to me." So the guru inquired what actually did happen. And after he listened to this story, he said, "You fool, don't you realise that the people yelling at you to get out of the way, they were that also?" And see, that's the point of the story. And we are like that young man. We hear these wonderful pointers, and there's nothing new here. Everything is that. God is love. Love is everything. There is only this, just this, nothing else. And yet we hear these pointers and we apply them selectively. What part of everything don't we understand? And it's this choosing is the question. In psychological terms, we talk about choice points. And a choice point is where there's 2 possible pathways before you. This or that. And you choose one. We're all familiar with this. Particularly if we look backwards, we could see, "Oh, I should have done this, I shouldn't have done that, I did this, I didn't do that." The funny thing though about choice is you can never prove a choice. You can never demonstrate the difference. You know, there's this choice point. I did this instead of that. And you can't prove the choice. Because if you go and do that to demonstrate what you didn't do, you can't do what you did. Now, so many philosophical traditions have wrestled with this question of choosing. And you could create a spectrum. At this end is determinism, fatalism. At this end is total choice. Determinism, fatalism. You can find examples of this within any tradition. In the 16th century in Christianity, it was Calvinism, predestination. Some are predetermined that they will be saved and the rest are damned, no matter what they do. You find it within Hinduism, particularly the more fundamentalist views. Oh, that's their karma. This person is born in such and such a caste, there's nothing that can be done. If you've ever been in a Muslim world, a devout Muslim will seemingly end every sentence with "Inshallah," God willing. Such a beautiful expression of submission, surrender to Allah. Yet it too can be distorted into some sort of crass fatalism. And within Advaita, you read particularly the later writings of Ramesh Balsekar. Everything's God's will. And he seems to be saying, do whatever you like. It's God's will what happens. The other end of the spectrum is total choice. And particularly some of the new age stuff around create your reality, dream your destiny, design your future. You choose, you're in control. Visualize your future, make it all happen. And you see those crystal wavers visualizing the car park. Ah, see, I did that. It's neither this nor that. As the ancients express it, choices are made, yet there's no choice maker. You see, you can't work this out with the mind. And any philosophical attempt is delusional. Krishnamurti used to say, he used to call it choiceless awareness. Now, you can't practice choiceless awareness. You can't train to do that. It's like rehearsing spontaneity. Yet we all taste that. When you're really in the flow, when you're really in the zone, choices simply happen. As the ancients say, choices are made, yet there is no choice maker. Many people live life as if they are the actor on centre stage, and everybody else is the audience or the passive background. This is a common fantasy. This me is the subject and everyone else is the object. This self-focus. And it's totally absurd, because that delusional thinking is carried out by everybody. Everyone else thinks they're the subject and everyone else is the object. Caught up in this subject-object dance. Because the truth is, we're looking at the sea of humanity, and it's a flow of humanity, and it self-organises. There is no subject. Everyone is object. And choices are made. And it happens spontaneously. If you look within a human brain, there is something like 10 billion neurons inside a human brain. And each of these neurons fires electrochemical impulses. And neurons connect with each other by they interact by either connecting or ignoring. And this happens in local communities. There are millions and millions of local communities, about 15,000 neurons, all self-organising locally. And they interact with each other. And there's no central programmer, there's no master controller. There's no one in charge. It self-organises spontaneously by connecting or ignoring, or ignoring. And this wonder of this human body-mind mechanism works. So the neurons in the brain are resonant of thoughts in the mind, or the resonant of humans interacting on this planet. The ancient mystic Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice-born, either ancient Egypt or ancient Greece. And he used to say, as above, so below, as within, so without. Hi, Carl, come in.
Good.
To see there. This reflective universe, as above, so below, as within, so without. It's holographic. Everything seems to be interconnected, and it plays out at every level. So the invitation here is to shift perception, to shift from self-focus, from me-focus to other focus, to shift from the self into the field of awareness, to see the field dancing. Now, I'm saying see, but we really mean multi-sensory shift of perception. Hello, hi.
Peter.
There you go, over there. the invitation for all of us to shift our way of perceiving. Because this self-focus, this me focus, is totally delusional. Because when we look within, looking for meaning, looking for enlightenment, it creates a funneling down. It creates a tunnel vision. And we miss so much information. Everything we need is appearing here. This self-organising field of awareness. Everything is that. This universe seems to be constructed on a need-to-know basis. There's a story that someone asked Nisargadatta if he could see what was happening in America. He simply responded, I don't need to know that. Everything you need is here. There's nowhere to go. It's just this. This field of awareness, this self-organising wonder. The 17th century Master Bankei, the Zen master, expressed it as, abide in the unborn Buddha mind. And he would describe the unborn Buddha mind simply. While people sat and listened to him, he would point out that while they were listening to him, while they engrossed in his teaching, they could hear spontaneously the cawing of the crow. They could hear the dinner bell ringing, indicating that it's time for lunch. They could smell the smells. They registered the sights in the room. They registered the people around them. All this happened spontaneously without any effort. This is the wonderful nature of this unborn Buddha mind, this field of awareness. There's nothing that has to be done here. Rather, there's some undoing. Stop focusing on this me, which actually doesn't exist. This internal focus, this me journey, it's a road to nowhere. Simply be present to the field, everything that's appearing. Shifting from self-centeredness to other-centeredness. It's that simple. It's all here. This field of awareness, dancing before you. Everything you're looking for is presently available. It self-organises spontaneously. And like the neurons in the brain, everything is connecting into local communities. It's just this. Nothing else. You don't have to go anywhere. Simply be present to this. And of course I don't want to set up some false dichotomy of this is bad, this is good. It's not either or. Because in this other-centeredness, in this field of awareness, the me story also appears. It's all presently here. So Francis of Assisi used to say to his monks, if you're walking anywhere to pray, let your walking be your prayer. Every step, every moment, every breath. Opening up all the senses, experiencing this. Nothing could be simpler. Inspiration, every breath in. Expiration, surrender, every breath out. Just this. One of the keys is opening up to feedback. This multisensory wonder, this field of awareness, is constantly giving us more information than we could ever deal with. Open up to feedback. Feedback is the key for shifting everything. This whole universe self-organises around feedback. Now there's feedback you like, there's feedback you don't like. There's no such thing as bad feedback. In fact, this feedback we don't like, it can be the most useful. I've spent over 40 years growing people. And one of the first shifts in development is opening up to feedback. And it's the simplicity of that. How do you open up to feedback? Listen. Very few people know how to actually listen. That's a gift in itself. Because if you're so busy talking to yourself, it's damn hard to hear anything else. Listen, inquire, explore. Feedback comes through every sense. And the way things seem to be constructed, feedback goes from the subtle to the gross. You get it as a hint, or as an impulse. You get it as a thought. You get it as a feeling. You get it as a rock hitting your foot. It doesn't matter. It's always available. It's always present. It's always here. Opening up to feedback. Now, feedback is one aspect of it. There's another concept, feed forward. Now, we may not be familiar with the expression, yet we know this. I'll give you an example of feed forward. You're working on a task, and as you're working away, you anticipate and project and imagine that when you finish this, everyone's going to love you and think you're a hero. And of course, that projection changes the way you actually do the task. That's a positive cycle. It also can be negative cycles of feed forward. Imagine someone's asked you to do some analysis of what went wrong. And as you start to explore and look at the causes of how everything's stuffed up, you start to feed forward that, hang on, this is pointing at the people who asked me the question. When I deliver this, they're going to hate it. In fact, they might shoot the messenger. In fact, I'm probably going to lose my job. That feed forward will profoundly affect the way you operate. Now, particularly, feed forward happens around fear and anxiety. Our fears become so self-limiting. Mahatma Gandhi used to say, you are the centre of a circle which has no circumference, no boundary. What creates the boundary is your fear. I learned a long time ago that I could never take an organisation or a group of people beyond the fears of the leader. Yes, you could grow people, everyone wants to grow, but if it starts to threaten the leader's sense of self, or they start to get anxious, it contracts. So our fears, our anxieties are what gets in the way. Within the Hindu pantheon, the god Vishnu. In the Hindu Trinity, it's Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, the creator, the sustainer, the destroyer of life. And there's a story how Vishnu was going off to a Trinity meeting, and he was a bit concerned to leave the other gods because they tended to muck up, and things went astray when he left them. So they had a good discussion, and they agreed to not open the door and behave themselves. So Vishnu went to the meeting. The meeting ended early, so he was heading home. Well, what happened? The minor gods at first behaved themselves. Everything was going smoothly. Until suddenly there was a knock on the door. Curiosity got the better of one of them, and he opened the door, and this monster leapt in and started screaming. And as he screamed, he got bigger, and everyone freaked out and jumped back. And the more they ran around, the bigger the monster got. And they were screaming and yelling and running and trying to hide, and the monster just kept growing. Anyway, Vishnu was returning home. As he got close, he could hear the yelling and screaming. He walked in the door and he sized the situation up immediately. And the monster came at him, screaming at him, and Vishnu just simply said, "Oh, hello, how are you? What do you need?" And the monster shrunk. And Vishnu kept connecting with him, speaking calmly, and inquiring what he really needed. And the more he did this, the smaller the monster became. The other gods came out of the hiding place and they gathered around Vishnu as the monster shrank smaller and smaller. Vishnu ordered the servants to actually give this monster anything he needed, eat food or drink. And the monster shrank down and became a tiny little mouse. And Vishnu pointed out to the gods that this was the fear monster. And it lived on fear. And the more frightened they became, the larger it got. The gods were amazed, and they decided to keep this monster now a little creature, and put it in a cage to remind them of what their fears did. The Irish have a similar story. In Irish folk stories, there's a story that every man and every woman has a demon that follows them. And it follows them their whole life. Unless they turn and face it, then it disappears forever. So be like Vishnu. These fears, instead of reacting, be present in them. Inquire, what do you need? What purpose do you serve? And the fears change. There's no physiological difference between anxiety and excitement. Or be like those wise Irish storytellers. Face the fear, look it in the face, and it's gone forever. Now, this field of awareness, there are so many metaphors to describe it. It's called the ocean of consciousness. It's called sky-like awareness, space-like awareness. People use images like the sea or space or sky to attempt to convey how it's unbounded, it's beginningless, it's endless. And I'm sure you notice that it's there every time you look. Whether you're looking out at the sea and the sky, whether you're looking on the land at the sky, whether you're looking in the city and there's buildings and there's the skyline, there's always a horizon. Now this horizon has no actuality. It's not real. It's a projection. Kalyani and I are different heights. If we stand side by side and look at the horizon, we see different horizons. If someone stands on the roof and look, they see a different horizon again. Go up in a helicopter, it's a different horizon. There is no such thing as an horizon. It's simply a projection. It has no independent existence. Without you observing, there's no horizon. There's a codependent fantasy between the me and the horizon. You could say that you are as real as the horizon. There's just this. Unbounded, beginningless, endless. Sailor Bob has a beautiful story about the self-shining sun. And the sun, its quality is, its nature is to simply shine. And in that shining, heat happens, warmth happens, evaporation happens. And through that evaporation, clouds form. And sometimes the clouds become so thick you can't see the sun. Yet you know it's there. And those of us who live in Melbourne know the grey skies. And it's a beautiful metaphor that even when the sky is completely grey, the sun hasn't gone anywhere. It's self-shining, ever present. And connecting to us, we're in the midst of all our psychological dramas and our stories and our freakouts and our anxieties and our fears, like clouds obscuring, the sun is still shining. It never goes anywhere. The self-shining sun is simply there. And taking the story further, Everything is created by that self-shining luminescence. And of course, the pointer is also pointing back to us. You are that self-shining sun, that luminescence. Everything appears spontaneously out of you, including the things that appear to veil like clouds. The English poet T.S. Eliot, in his poem Wicked Gidding, beautiful expression. The end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and to know the place for the first time. Because what we're talking about here is this field of awareness. Now this awareness is always here. It's been with you all your life. Now the content is constantly changing. And it's constantly new and fresh. Yet if you go back in your life, go back 5 years, were you there? Of course. How do you know you were there? There's the knowing, that awareness, that knowing. And you look different, thoughts may be different, ideas different, yet that knowing, that awareness is there. Go back another 10 years, same thing. How do you know that you were there? There's a knowing. That awareness is always present. And we go through all our explorations, looking for meaning, looking for enlightenment, looking for realization, awakening. And when we start to see it, we come back here. That old saying, what you are looking for is looking. You are that. This self-shining awareness. There's only one issue. Ownership. Doership. This claiming. Yes, I did it. Yes, they're my thoughts, my fears. No, they're not. They're simply arising. So, the hint is, get off the ship. Ownership, doership, all this me stuff. It's simply a story. In is where it's at. Life is in, the present continuous. Flowing, relating, connecting, being. Relax is that self-shining awareness. Even something as simple as a really good conversation. There's no me, there's no you. There's no one thinking, oh, should I say that? Or I better not say that. Or this might upset them. There's just this flowing. You know? They're like, we all have a present experience of choiceless awareness. It's just the flow. And conversation, a heart-to-heart conversation is a good example. Or a group of musicians playing, and they talk about being there really cooking, you know. Nobody works out, should we change key or not, or should we change the tempo? It just all just happens intuitively. Or a group of sports people playing in a team game, it becomes almost telepathic. One will just run as the ball is already, before it's gone, it catches it. You know. The hand just goes up.
So coming along to these meetings, I feel that I hear about this possibility of being in the zone continuously almost. I don't know that.
Yeah, but see, again, it's this figure ground reversal. The proposition here is that you are always already in the zone. You are always already in the flow. You are already the field of awareness. Yeah. And it's the habit of identifying with the separate me story that gets in the way. So we don't have to do anything to get into it. We simply have to notice what's stopping us from appreciating it.
Yeah. It's sort of.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, it's like a car accident or a near accident. You reflect later, and there's that heightened awareness, and everything is slowed down, and it's like, whoa! And people can have experience of being out of their body and seeing the whole thing. It's like that jolt. Enable them to actually see through the ordinary story machine, and to notice what's going on. So again, it's not a matter. It's nothing we have to do. It's a matter of just seeing through the stuff that we're caught up in. And so much of it is, for many people, is internal dialogue.
Yeah.
Is this? Am I there yet? Is this it? And while we're running the projection and then the comparison story, we miss the very fact that this is it.
It's the habit, Tony, of being drawn into the spontaneous narrative that runs up the thinking stream, the thinking flow. And in our regular life, it's that thinking that enables us to do things, to sort things out, to resolve issues, whatever it might be. Yet what we're speaking about is often called prior to the thinking. And thinking arises in that spaciousness. So pulling back from putting the attention in that thinking stream, it's probably going to keep going and running and doing things most of the time. But pulling back from putting the attention into that. And even going back to Nisargadatta's I amness that he speaks about extensively. And Ramana Maharshi also spoke about that. And that amness is just simply that sense of wakefulness, of presence, prior to the attention going into the thinking. So it's prior to that attention going into the thinking. In the morning we wake up and there's a little moment of wakefulness before we re-inhabit, we put on that coat of identity again. I think everyone knows that experience.
Not quite, almost.
Yeah. Well, not quite's pretty good. And staying with that, purely that sense of presence, that, wakefulness, not I am awake, or I am awake and I'm running late for work, or whatever it might be, but wakefulness. And cutting back to that, letting that thinking stuff go past. If we don't claim ownership of the thinking, it's easier to let it flow past. It's like traffic. It's a beautiful analogy. Yeah. The traffic flowing past. It's not your traffic. It's not your traffic. Just let it go. Likewise, the thinking is spontaneously kicked up. If you were actually doing it, if you were driving the thinking mechanism, the spontaneous flow, then you'd be rearranging the thoughts so that they were joyful and blissful and marvellous and all the other sorts of things that we prefer. So coming back, letting that thinking stream just flow of its own and drawing the attention back into just amness. Just, you're awake. There's consciousness. Yeah? There's unconscious and there's conscious. Unconscious when you're asleep or under an anaesthetic. Conscious is awake. Coming back to that consciousness without putting the attention. And if the attention flows into the thinking stream, pull it back again. And it's interesting because Nisargadatta says that's all he did. He said he went to that sense of presence, that I amness, as often as possible.
Okay.
So he actually used the term every spare moment. That's all he did, every spare moment. So just think about it. You're waiting in a queue in the supermarket, trolleys everywhere, noise, perfect opportunity. You've probably got 3 minutes at least.
Yes.
Going to that I amness. The day is filled with opportunities. Cutting back to that sense of presence. The thinking stream, of course, it's the habit. Kicks up. If you get pulled in, don't judge. It's neither good nor bad. See it and let it go. Because we're in the habit of one of those thoughts, the me notion, imagining it's doing the thinking. It's absurd.
It's rubbing off, but it's,
Yeah.
know, you hear people hearing the same thing over and over again on their trips.
Yeah, it's unpicking the habits. See, these are lifelong habits. That's why going to that sense of presence as often as possible.
That's right.
New habit.
The intelligence that you are is doing everything. This life essence, this core, this field, this wakefulness, this awareness, call it what you like, it's doing everything. And it brings you here, it brings you there. And even if we're caught up in the thought up story, something gets through. And like come here, there's a whole lot of concepts being thrown around, hints and pointers. And it's either it's taken in spontaneously by the intelligence, and it kicks it up or not. And it does it. Something pops up, and you do it. So Bankei, when he was talking about this unborn Buddha mind that we are, he was saying break the mold of self-centeredness. And he called it a habit. And because it's a habit, it can change. And as Kalyani was saying, talking about Nisargadatta's own spiritual seeking, it was like developing a new habit. And whenever you remember, be present. Whenever you remember, open up to feedback. Whenever you remember, listen.
Yeah, I think the habit is not something that gets developed by the awareness. The habit is the mind, I think. So it's like you're changing old habits with new habits.
But see, what I'm suggesting here is everything is coming out of the intelligence. Everything. Like there's a traditional analogy within yoga, they talk about the iron and the fire. And you can take a piece of metal and you put it in a fire and it glows, it gets hot. And it takes on the properties of fire. And it's indistinguishable. It glows, it's hot, it burns, it's red. Yet when you take the fire away, it cools down. So the thought up story, the me story is like the iron, and the fire is the intelligence, the life force. So everything is coming out of that. Or another analogy, we can make a distinction between thinking and knowing. And we all have a sense of that distinction. You know you're awake. You know it's daytime. You know it's nighttime. Or you meet someone you haven't seen for years and there's a knowing. I know this person. That knowing is prior to the thought. You don't have to think it through to figure out whether it's daytime or nighttime. The knowing is immediate. So Bob often used to start his meetings with a beautiful invocation. He'd say, I'm not speaking to any body. I'm not speaking to any mind. I am speaking to that I am that I am. This is heart to heart. Or you could say, speaking to the essence, the core that you are, to remind it. And remind it, and it's intelligent. And that intelligence will either pick it up or not. And it may just give us a hint or a nudge tomorrow or later today or next week. Hang on. Focus on the field of awareness. Stop getting caught up in this soap opera. Just connect. Listen to what others are saying. Open up to feedback. Be present to the wonder. Open the eyes, open the ears, open the feelings, smell. So, be the knowing, not the thought up story. And when you catch yourself in those old habits, just are these.
I'm spending a lot of time just constantly reminding myself to look at what comes up in me and to do what you said. To expand my awareness in that moment, to not get caught up in the reaction. So have you got anything that you might want to share?
Well, just one thing I think is really important is not to judge.
Yeah.
Because we're in the habit of judging ourselves. And usually it's down this end of the spectrum, the harsh judgments. And particularly if you're in a difficult situation and it's very challenging, then of course it's quite natural for those that we love. We want to do the best. And so that it can exaggerate that sense of judging when we feel we haven't been able to reach the best kind of response we should have offered, or the best kind of behaviour to support that person.
You mean judging ourselves for
Correct.
our reactions and
Correct,
responses?
correct. So, one hint, and people have something to say about this as well. One hint is to start from being softer with yourself. When the judgments arise, I can't do this, it's too hard, or I should have done a better job, or whatever it might be, whatever those particular judgments are, see that they're coming up and be easier with them. There's that judgment that I'm da-da-da-da-da. Oh, there it is. And just start to let those judgments go. And of course they'll come up. But every time we're a little kinder to them, that will help. Because any of those judgments or senses of constraint or that whole gamut of difficulties that it's being experienced is also the thatness expressing in those particularised forms. So it's not that there's something that shouldn't be there. It's a very spontaneous and natural response.
This is focusing on yourself,
Judgments that arise within ourselves.
But when it seems to be another being, then...
Judgment, we're just staying with this at the moment.
Sorry.
Judgments that are arising within ourselves. And I told this story a while ago, but it's like it keeps coming up again. The story of the white horse. It's a traditional Chinese story. I'm sure you know it. Everyone knows it. And there's various variations of it. Just try and peek through so I can see you. And the story goes, there's an old man in ancient China who has a beautiful white horse. And the villagers gather round him one time and they say, oh old man, it's a beautiful white horse, why don't you sell it, get a lot of money, and then you can have a more comfortable time in your old age. This is very foolish that you're not selling the horse. The old man said, you can't say it's foolish, you can't say it's not foolish. All you can say is I have a white horse. Now a few weeks later, the horse breaks out of the enclosure. And the villagers hear about this and, oh, stupid old man, you should have sold the horse. And they gather around and say, oh, old man, this is a tragedy. This is terrible what's happened. The horse is broken out, now you have nothing. This is terrible, it's dreadful, stupid. And he says, you can't say it's stupid. You can't say it's not stupid. You can't say it's terrible. You can't say it's not terrible. All you can say is that the horse is broken out. It's gone into the hills. A few weeks later, the horse returns and brings with it 12 wild horses. And the old man and his son quickly make a corral and fence them in. And of course the villagers, it's a small village, the villagers get wind of this and they all gather around, oh old man, this is wonderful, this is a boon, this is great good fortune has come upon you, you are now so fortunate and it's excellent and how wonderful. And he looks at them all and he says, no, he says, don't judge. You can't say this is wonderful, you can't say this is a miracle. All you can say is that the horse has returned and it's brought 12 wild horses with it. A few weeks later, his son is on one of the horses, breaking it in, and he falls very badly and breaks both of his legs. And so the old man calls for the village bone setter, who arrives with his bandages and straps and binds the young man's legs with splints and instructs him that he'll have to lie still for 6 to 8 weeks. And of course the villagers hear all about this and they race over to the old man because now they're really onto it. They're really certain it's terrible, it's a tragedy, it's dreadful. They got the evidence. And so they start telling the old man, oh, this is dreadful, this is shocking, this is such bad fortune, this has happened. And the old man says, you can't say it's bad fortune. You can't say it's not bad fortune. all you can say is he has broken his legs. A few weeks later, into town marched the army. And they're off to fight some kind of war in a very, very distant province, and they're wanting new fodder for the front line. So they come in and they conscript all of the young men in the village, round them up and conscript them. And they march them off over the hill to some distant province. In the afternoon, the villagers gather round the old man and they say, oh old man, we're so sorry. You were right and we were wrong. The fact that it happened to your son is great fortune because he hasn't gone to war. And this is a terrible circumstance for us. And the old man said, listen, when are you villagers going to get it? You know, you cannot say it's good fortune. You cannot say it's bad fortune. All you can say is that the young men have marched off with the army. And the story finishes there, but of course it can go on forever. And the whole point of it is whatever's arising in our immediate field, we have the habit of judging this as positive or negative. And anything that's seemingly positive, we want to hang on to it. And of course, you know, what's going to happen? Everything comes and goes. Nothing stays the same. As soon as that pleasant feeling, that sense of blissfulness, the happy part of life, whatever it might be, starts to dissipate, we go chasing after it, and there's a great anguish and sadness when this thing disappears. Likewise, if things that are arising are deemed unpleasant, not what we want, that can be external things that are happening, or most likely, and more commonly, our internal response to that. So that I don't like this, or this is horrible, this is too hard, it's too difficult, I'm not good enough, the whole, we all know all the storylines, we've practiced it very well through our lives. When that stuff arises, then we try and push this stuff away. You know? And so either of these things, the pushing away or the hanging on to, require lots of oxygen, a lot of energy. And it's a fixation. As the Buddha said, you know, the only issue in all of this is one of fixation. We don't want, and we do want. And like that old man in the story, if whatever's arising, we don't label it as good or as bad, it can simply flow as it does. And there's not that angst when it's deemed as something that's difficult, or angst when the great wonderfulness starts to dissipate. And that other thing too, traditional statement, is honour yourself, worship yourself, bow to yourself, because you are the thatness expressing in that particularised form. And in actual fact, that wakefulness that you are, you've never been away from. So that all that can ever take place as such is a recognition of what already and truly is. And again, it's just that habit of putting our attention in that thinking stream that keeps us from the immediacy. And that's all there is, this isness, this immediacy. And we have layers and layers of filters, which are just habits, thoughts, beliefs that have built up in our experience, our life experience. And it's not a problem, it's neither good nor bad. It's just the natural process of development as such. And allowing these filters, these expectations, these notions, this identification with the thinking stream to subside, just to allow it to subside, losing that tenure on it, and in particular, that the critical one in all of this is this me notion, this me identity that the things are going to happen to me. Seeing through that one, and then you're left with what you've never left. You're left with what you always are, and that you've never been away from.
So let's be clear, you'll get nothing here. In fact, we'll show you how to take away what you thought you had.
Getting rid of what you've never had. Yeah.
But the funny thing about this stuff is you look and you can't see it anywhere. And then when you see it everywhere.
Everywhere, that's
Yeah.
true.
Because there's no special place. It's just this. This field of awareness is wherever we are. You know, Bob used to say, people want to get into the now. He used to say, try to get out of the now. Because we're always here. There's nothing to do to get here. Simply be present to what's happening. And one of our teachers, Ramesh Balsika, he used to call these sorts of things tastes or samples. And we all have these samples, these hints. That experience of wonder, that experience of oneness when you feel so connected to someone. There's no you, there's no me. The outpouring of love that can happen spontaneously. That feeling at one with the crowd, with the group. They're wonderful. Just samples. And it's not that we're getting something. It's simply that we got out of the way so that what's always already here touched us.
Yes, yes, yes.
It's like there's a new seeing
Exactly.
happening.
Yes. Yes.
With what you said before, Kalyani, about being softer with ourselves, it's you're also softer with your judgments of other people.
Absolutely.
Because how you judge other people is how harsh you judge yourself. So, yeah.
And that Christ said that, love others as you love yourself.
Yeah.
Badly. So there's a reflective thing that happens. It has to operate that way.
Yeah.
And this thing of this notion of things being a habit too.
Yes, yeah.
Because the whole thing that props up the little habitual universe, mental universe that we've created, is just propped up by habit. Particular thoughts that have stuck. Maybe stuff that's been said to us when we were little. Everyone's got bags of that stuff. Some people have been working on it really well, repeating the thing, oh, I'm no good, I'm no good, I'm no good, and embroidering it and doing a great job with it and turning it into a significant kind of thing. And all this stuff is habitual, and every time we start to unpick or just erode one of those habits, it diminishes. That's the beautiful image of like a precipice. You see it down by the beach, a cliff face, a precipice. And the sea, the air, the wind, the rain, the heat, over time has eroded that undercutting of that precipice. And so you've got to be very careful walking out there. It's been undercut. And so, one day, with the action, the natural action of the wind and the rain and the sun, one day that precipice just falls of its own.
Yes, yeah.
No one's
Beautiful.
doing it.
Yeah.
And that's what we do with this stuff. Every time something is seen through as false, it loosens that habit. And then, without any doing by anyone, it falls of its own.
Yes, really beautiful.